discovering that some people are sending it and it's not getting as much as it's going out. Instead of not putting it in the server, it's all online. And this is why it takes from the and somebody just sending it to them.
He's not feeling it. That feels like crap. He needs to, get sent out.
How's it going, Ed, my buddy?
You're up to my nap time.
You get the revised version.
It's over an hour and 5 minutes. You guys go an hour and a half, an hour and 40.
Or I get the same conversation about
You do everything the same.
I can only eat so much.
They have health insurance. Their insurance lifted up. We have people sign up,
So they're watching us on you're watching us live.
Yeah, but how did you guys over my head? I'm about you saying that today.
That was the Unfortunately, you have to stand. I know.
But we got it pretty neat. We have a system and they got medium you can see the parking lot. So like when they're sitting there, they see all our cars and they see us. So if anybody's we don't really have a concern, but I think today they have
We could throw it out. No, just like you're still learning. How you doing? Good. Good. It's all right.
President.
All right, good afternoon, brothers and sisters.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, brothers and sisters. Good to see you. So glad that you chose to make the sacrifice of being here. I know some of you changed work schedules to be here. I know that this is a genuine spiritual sacrifice, and I appreciate it. I am glad that you're here. We are going to be presided over by the Reverend Stowe in just a moment. I do have a couple of announcements. One, we are broadcasting on the internet. You see over there, our brother and sister Joe and Nancy have set up a camera over there that is going out on, what is it going on? Facebook?
YouTube.
YouTube. Going out on YouTube. To the folks in Oxford who wanted to be here and couldn't be, and to all our ships at sea. We are broadcasting out to all of them. So you've been warned. If you don't want the whole world to know, you raised your hand or whatever, you've been warned. Secondly, if you have not yet received these items, you should. Oxford's conference booklet is blue. Everyone here from Oxford should have one of these blue ones, and Quinsigamond's is white like this. Everyone from Quinsigamond should have a white one, and then there is another supplement. This smaller white says Holy Conferencing in our churches. That pattern is embedded within the document of Quinsigamond, but I think since we're together, it might be easier for us to just refer to this one for the service structure. All right. I think that's all the announcements that I had. Please.
So, as you follow along in that worship bulletin, says Holy Conferencing in our churches, you'll notice that there's a thing that says presider. I will be the presider. I would ask that you be the people. And then on pages 2 and 3, you may notice that there are these rectangles. It's called Holy Conferencing Ministry Questions. I like to think of it as you helping to shape a sermon that shares about the ministries of your congregation. So don't be shy when I ask these questions. Feel free to share what thoughts come to your mind. And then I would ask that we have somebody being willing to be our scriptural prayer reader. And then we can continue on with our worship and work. So, this church conference is themed around the scripture from Micah 6:8. What does the Lord require of you? But to do justice, to love kindness, and to walk humbly with your God. And you'll notice that that theme kind of pops up several different times and places. So, let us join together. In the beginning, God created everything and said that it was good. Even today, God shares with us all that is good in this world. God is good.
All the time.
All the time.
God is good.
For the sake of all that is good, God affords us the compliment and the privilege of requiring our full participation. And so we are going to sing, How Shall I Come Before the Lord? The words may be unfamiliar, but I think the tune is a little bit familiar to many of us. And so I'm going to ask our musician to play it through once before we join in singing.
Yeah.
To
act justly,
What does God require of us?
to love mercy,
What does God require of us?
to walk humbly with our God.
Let us join in singing.
In all our ways, let loving kindness rule our days. As this earth with heavenly joy, we shall walk humbly with our
I hereby call the church conferences of Quinsigamond and Oxford United Methodist Churches into session, and I ask for your response.
We
are here as a United Methodist community of God to account for our ministries, to order our life together, and to resolve that in the year ahead we will answer the call of Jesus Christ to his disciples, leading this church into active ministries of love, truth, and justice.
Knowing that we are all called together, to ministry together, lay and clergy alike, let us enter into the business of your church conference. So I see that we have two people who are here already taking notes, but I'd like to have us officially vote on our secretaries for today. So,
The Quinsigamond lay leadership puts forth quite unwillingly Robin Mercurio, and Oxford lay leadership puts forth slightly more willingly Sherry Abrams.
all those in favor of these fantastic women being our secretaries, taking minutes for posterity's sake, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Say I'll do it. Any abstentions? Hearing none, we have duly elected Robin and Sherry. So I would invite Oxford to take a look for the minutes of their 2018 church conference. That is found on page 1 of their blue book. And I'm going to invite Quinsigamond to take a look at their church conference minutes, which is found on page, not numbered, but shortly after the bulletin. Make sure that your name is spelled correctly, and if you remember being there and you're not listed, we'll let the secretaries know so that we can make amendments. So let's just take a minute or two to be refreshed, because it's been a long time since church conference of last year.
Bottom of the first page.
What church?
The very last dot. Consider me. And I don't remember if I wrote these up or not. Maybe. But that last sentence there doesn't make sense. But a large delegation from Africa and Europe, but not the New England jurisdiction, it's the whole general conference. We want to keep in the Northeast or New England jurisdiction and conference, and I think that means districts, that districts.
No, it's the northeastern jurisdiction has 10 conferences. And the general conference has the largest delegations from Africa.
Yeah, I think it needs to say the general conference.
It's confusing because we have all these levels of bureaucracy in the United Methodist Church, and in fact, very similarly, the United States as government is configured in similar sorts of ways. We have an executive branch, a legislative branch, and a judicial branch. The judicial branch being the general conference. And then we have all these different levels, kind of like the different appellate courts and local courts.
And we could stand for New England or could stand for Northeast.
That's right, it's very confusing. So thank you for your patience wading through that.
And it is northeast jurisdiction.
Any other questions or clarifications? Are we ready to vote to approve the minutes from last year? Okay. For those who are members of Oxford, do you approve the minutes of the 2018 church conference?
So moved.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, all those in favor of approving the Quinsigamond church conference minutes from 2018 as amended, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Great. So then we approve, we take a look at our fund balance report. For Quinsigamond, it's the thing that follows. For Oxford, page 17. For Oxford, I have a copy of it in my hands.
Page 17.
Well, that's technically something different.
Oh, okay.
We have a report that looks like this.
So, if I can interject,
Yeah.
the one that's in Oxford's book is our year-to-date from January 1st to October 31st, 2019. In past conferences, the district superintendent had asked for the audit report, and I did bring that last year's audit report and gave it to the district superintendent just 10 minutes ago while she was trying to eat. And seeing that it talks about the audit, there were no recommendations from the person who did the audit, who happens to be in the room right now. There were no recommendations, so we did have a good audit for 2018. If there are any other questions, I can address them.
So the audit is due to the district office the end of February, beginning of March each year. And the reason why we bring it to a church conference is so that the wider church community can just kind of take a look and see, how much we had at the beginning of the year, how much we ended the year with. And I don't know necessarily about you all, but I know that every church that I've served, there's been a little pot of money here for the UMW, and a little pot of money here for the youth, and a little pot of money over there for flowers and things, and you wouldn't necessarily know all the different places where money is held unless you looked at the audit. So it's just kind of to give a broader view. I'm happy to pass this along for anyone who'd like to see it from Oxford. And then we may have some questions. For those who are members of Consignment, do we have any questions on the fund balance report?
I'm here to answer them if you got any questions.
Hearing no questions from Consignment, are we ready to vote on the fund balance report to approve it? All those in favor of approving the Consignment fund balance report, say aye.
Aye.
For those who are members of Oxford who have just received the report, do you have any questions that you'd like to share or raise? I don't want to rush you all. Did everybody get a chance to look at it? Okay. All right. Are you ready to vote?
Yes.
All those in favor from Oxford of approving your fund balance report, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? So we come to the first of our Holy Conferencing Ministry questions. Now remember, this is an opportunity for you to share if you so desire. In 2 or 3 words, what is God longing for and working for a more just world? What acts of justice has God required of us?
Help others.
Help others.
Growth in faith
Growth in faith.
and attendance.
And attendance. Amen.
Expand our prayer life.
Expanding our prayer life. Yeah.
Spread the gospel.
To spread the gospel.
Stay in a circle.
That's from the Wesleyan formation class, in case you're wondering.
Love one another.
Love one another.
Walk humbly.
Walk humbly. Indeed.
Embrace our diversity.
Embrace our diversity. Would someone from this side of the room be willing to be our scriptural prayer reader? Go ahead. It's on the middle, page 2. I'm so sorry.
Inside the box.
In the box.
This is what the Lord Almighty said. Administer justice, show mercy, and compassion to one another.
Amen. So we're going to take the trustees' report. There are 3 disciplinarily mandated questions that I have to ask, and then I will ask each church if they would just highlight some of the work that they've done this past year. So, let's start with Oxford. Has the congregation received any bequests from a will in the last year?
Megan, our chairperson of the trustees is not here at this present time.
Okay. But for those who are on finance, you might have a sense, did we use any bequests? Or did you?
We are kept separate. Trustees hold everything close to the vest. It's not-
Okay. So, thank you. Part of the reason why we ask is when we receive bequests, we need to have a church conference so that the church community can vote to accept them. Now, I know it seems silly to say, no, we don't want money, right? Especially because in this day and age, I know every church is struggling to pay the bottom line. But in my first appointment that I had, it was a 3-point charge, and it was 3 tiny little rural churches, and they were supposed to each sell their church building, and they were going to build a community center in the center. And that seemed like a great idea, and 2 churches went along with that and sold their church building. The 3rd church decided that they were going to be a cantankerous bunch, and they kept their church building, but they did give money for the community center. And then when the wealthiest man in town died, he left $250,000 to the church. And they were so grateful they were going to be able to go and to do ministry and mission and reach out to the schools. And this is a really poor rural farming community. So there was a lot of opportunities to do things that they just didn't have any money for previously. And they were so excited. And then they looked at the restrictions on the bequest, and the bequest was so that they could build a church building. And they could only use the money for a church building in the depot, which is of course one of those churches that had sold their church building to come together. And so when we receive a bequest, we as a congregation need to come together to vote on the bequest and to look at what the restrictions are to see if it makes sense. Because if somebody came and said, I want to leave $250,000 to this church, you might say, praise God. But if they do requests like a restriction such as, this can only be used for a children's bell choir, and we don't have children in the congregation, that might not be the best use of those funds. And so you'd be able to go back to those who made the bequest and say, you know, that's really wonderful that you would like a bell choir, but maybe we could use this more so to help fund our mission and ministry outreach to the congregation, or from the congregation out into the community.
The trustees of Oxford have not received any bequests.
Okay. Quinsigamond. Do we have somebody from the trustees here?
The chair of the trustees is in Pennsylvania,
Okay.
but we gave you a statement, we need a statement, but the trustees have not received a request.
Okay.
Request.
Great. So, Oxford, have we used any capital or principal from investments or endowments for operating expenses this year?
No, we have not.
Good. How about Quinsigamond?
No, we have not.
Good.
Use the interest.
That is totally fine. And it's okay to use capital or principal if it's for things such as the capital improvements, like if you need to replace your roof, that's fine. It's just for the paying the light bills, paying the pastor's salary, that it kind of is a red flag to me that maybe we need to be talking about some stewardship, some financial things. So, okay, great. And Oxford, do you have a parsonage?
Yes, we do. We rent it out presently.
Okay, great. You know that if you decided that you don't want a parsonage anymore, that you would need to take the proceeds from the sale of the parsonage and hold it until a time in which you either wanted to buy another parsonage, or you could use the interest from that to pay for our pastor's housing allowance.
Right now, our rent pays for our heater downstairs. We took a mortgage out, so the rent pays for our heat loan.
Good. Quinsigamond, I just was in your parsonage the other day, so I know that you have not sold it unless it was a very quick sale.
And news to me.
So,
Being signed this morning.
same thing, if you want to sell your parsonage, it's a good idea to let your district superintendent know.
We have not sold.
Good. Do the Oxford trustees have anything that they wanted to share in their report?
We do have a window project presently underway. We're replacing 3 major windows in our church, and that work should be done this week.
Wonderful. Quinsigamond, do you have things that you'd like to share from your report, from your chair and abstention?
Nothing significant, we've just constantly doing upgrades on things that need to be repaired and replaced, so as needed. As we described this morning, the roof for the past.
I was going to say, I heard about the roof.
It's not a very big roof. Took an afternoon.
And I would interject, if it's acceptable, that on behalf of both churches, I'm continually blessed by how much work is done by not only the trustees, although they lead in those efforts, but the general membership of the church. You work very hard and you plan well, and you are good stewards of the facilities that God has given to you. I can't imagine calculating the tens of thousands of dollars that both of your churches would have spent to hire people to seal bricks, replace bricks, do flashing work on the roof, dig out things, painting. I mean, the Oxford Church is poised to put in windows. It would cost thousands to do what people volunteer to do. And that in-kind work and donation is not reflected in these papers, but boy, I sure know the difference it makes, and I'm truly grateful.
So I think that we should give our trustees, even though they're in abstention, at this time, a round of applause. So we're going to turn for Oxford on page 8, for Quinsigamond, the next page after the trustees report, for the Staff Parish Relations Committee report to the DS pastoral compensation. There are 3 numbers that we are highlighting: the pastor's cash salary, the housing exclusion, and the total reimbursables. So I think Quinsigamond will go first.
The Staff Parish Relations Committee?
On these numbers. Hearing none, I think we need to vote. And let's vote for the cash salary first. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? And for our housing exclusion of $2,000, that's $2,000 taken from the cash salary that the pastor can use pre-tax to furnish the parsonage or to buy things like paper towels, toilet paper, light bulbs, whatever is needed for the parsonage. All those in favor of this $2,000 housing exclusion, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? And all those in favor of a total reimbursables of $1,700, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you. And for Oxford, on page 8, do we, Sherry, are you going to? All those from Oxford who approve of the cash salary of $25,057, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All those in favor of the household exclusion of $2,000, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? And all those in favor of total reimbursable expenses of $2,000, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Great. And do either of the staff parishes want to share a brief highlight of the last year?
Basically summarize my report. We were sad to have 2 of our staff members step down. Amy LaPrade was a secretary for many years and received a full-time job elsewhere. And also Myrtle Okai, I believe, was our nursery superintendent for 15 years, and she resigned in March. So we were glad to have some of our current members step up. We wanted someone to replace the secretary, knowing that someone was familiar with the church traditions and church events and procedures, as well as a regular attendee. And Robin is our jack of all trades with many hats. She is chair of education and also outreach and evangelism, and goes to worship committee. So she has filled Amy's shoes. There was a little bit of transition. Amy did some training with her on Saturdays, and she was working full-time, so they would come in and work long hours on Saturdays and weekends. Also, Robin's daughter, Becky Klug, is our new nursery attendant, and she has a wonderful rapport with the children and takes them after the children's message into the nursery. And you can check out the new rug that they purchased with that. Edla Liberty is our organist and choir director and shares positions with Oxford and Considerman. And we are glad about his innovations and talents and expertise. Getting into rehearsal time has been a little bit of a challenge because some of us live far away. He does have rehearsals on Thursday evening, but some of us don't drive at night anymore or else live far away. So we try to get a lot of rehearsal time Sunday morning before church if we can. Bob Holdridge has worked for the church for many, many years. I don't know how many. Bob, do you know how many?
No way, he's always in the section.
And he always polishes the pews and keeps everything spick and span. And we kind of have a 2-for-1 because his wife is in charge of the altar guild, and she's always here with him, and she performs a lot of duties as well. Bob Johnson, our Ed Council Chair, had brought it to our attention that the Book of Discipline requires a hiring procedure and policy. So we've been working on that throughout the spring and summer, and Bob has an outline, and we're perhaps going to have an addendum with more details. So we hope to finalize that maybe at our meeting 2 weeks from today. And most importantly, we're thankful for Barry, and we're thankful for our staff that work so hard and coordinate together and make this church a wonderful place to be that feels like home.
Let's give a round of applause to our staff here. Do you want to give a report?
I believe Angela may have had one, but she forgot to send it to me before she left. So, I mean, I can just, it's a page. 24. Okay, thanks.
I know that you were busy this year.
bear with me, I forgot my glasses, so if it sounds like it's gibberish, it's just me. Thank you. So, PSPRC had a positive year in 2018. We were successful in filling the organist choir director position by hiring and been wonderful. We're so thankful, so blessed. It is also the current organist at UNC. We are blessed with Ed, and it is such a joy to hear that one will be in service again. Overall, it has been an uneventful year with full staff, which we are very, very thankful for. Amen.
So let's give a round of applause for So we're going to turn now to the year-to-date finances. The year-to-date finances for Quinsigamond are following the staff-parish relations report. And for Oxford, it's on page 13 and following. Is somebody from the Oxford Church ready to answer any questions that we may have about our year-to-date?
I do have the profit and loss included in there through October 31st. And then, of course, the fund balance report for 2019 as well. I did notice on your notes here about mission shares, I'm cautiously optimistic that we may not meet our full mission share requirement. But there's still, what's today, December 1st, so we have 30 days plus a couple of weeks before the cutoff in January, so time will tell. We did have a pledge drive in October, and we had pledges totaling approximately $61,000.
Thank you. Do we have any questions on Oxford's year-to-date report? Hearing none. All those, well, we don't even need to vote on this. This is just for your information. Is there a 2020 budget?
There is one, it's on page 18.
Perfect.
And this has not been reviewed through our Ed Council yet. This is a draft.
Okay.
Although the Finance Committee did update the recommendations from SPRC, so we're endorsing those salary changes. And we do have the conference shares updated and a few other bills have been updated that we have gotten estimates for. But I just assumed that the Administrative Council we're going to meet in December and we could vote on it then.
Absolutely, and then just send a final
Right.
to the district office.
So this is considered our draft.
Yeah, great.
Work in progress.
I was going to say, Most churches I've been to so far, if they've had a 2020 budget prepared, they just crossed off 19 and wrote in 20.
Essentially where we started from.
So, thank you for your hard work. Consignment, are we ready to address any questions that we might have on the year-to-date? Do we have any questions? Or would somebody from this church like to share some highlights?
As far as the apportionments, we received a grant this year, so my hope, and right now, we're planning on getting the apportionments paid in full. We did like Barry mentioned today, we did a pledging campaign stewardship, and we had 39 pledges, which amounted to, I think, $41,500, which is more than we've had over the last many years that I can remember. I'm working hard paying the bills. It's very tough sometimes. I did have to take $3,500 out of the money market account and our investment account to help me last month. But hopefully we'll get through the rest of the year with Christmas donations and people catching up at the end of the year to make it through the year and get all our apportionments paid.
Gail, for clarity for all of us, does that represent what we would normally think of as principal or interest?
That's interest. The interest from the accounts that are in the investment account go into a money market account, which I'm allowed to take out of there without any kind of vote because it's just interest we received. And in order to take money out of the principal, we have to have a charge conference in order for me to take it out.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you for clarifying that. I was wondering that myself. Do you mind if I put on my official DS hat and give a spiel for just a minute on mission shares? Thank you. As you know, our bishop feels it's incredibly important for us to pay mission shares, and he has realized that it has become increasingly more difficult for churches to be able to do so in full. Because it seems like every year the mission shares go up, the expenses go up, the pastor's salary is encouraged to go up, and yet the same people are in the pews and it's harder and harder to make those dollars stretch. And so the bishop asked this past year for the General Commission on Finance and Administration to come in from Nashville to take a look at our mission shares and to see where are the places in the annual conference that we can adjust things so that the mission shares are not as burdensome to the local congregations. And so they came back with a couple of suggestions. One of the suggestions that they made was that we have a very top-heavy structure and that there were in other conferences in our jurisdiction, for the same number of churches, they had less districts. And so what they suggested was that we go to either 7 or 5 districts. But knowing the geography of New England, it's hard to imagine somebody having basically double the geographic commute. I mean, we already have one that's the entire state of Vermont. And if you've ever been to Vermont, you know you can't get there from here. So for that district superintendent who has 114 churches under her purview, and it takes her 4 hours in good weather to get from one corner to the other, and that might even be very generous. So the bishop decided that 7 districts sounded like a good way to go, and we got that report about a week after they announced I was coming to be this district superintendent. So they did not replace one of the district superintendents. starting July 1st for the tri-state area, which is Portland, Maine, Lawrence, Mass, and the seacoast of New Hampshire. And so the district superintendent of Metro Boston took the Lawrence area, the New Hampshire district superintendent took the seacoast of New Hampshire, and Karen Munson, who's in mid-Maine, took the Portland area of Maine. And so that's been working this year. And as of July 1st, we will lose another district superintendent, and we will redistrict, and the bishop says that each district other than Vermont will probably have about 85 churches. So my hope and desire is to stay with you all, but I will add about 25 more churches under my care. So I am so grateful that I've had the opportunity to worship with both congregations today, because it will become more difficult for me to be in the pews with you all on Sunday mornings. So hopefully, with the loss of 2 district superintendents, with the loss of 2 administrative assistants, with the selling of 2 district parsonages, that should help to lower some of the mission shares for the local churches. I know that apportioned across 550 or 560 churches may not seem like a lot, but I do want you to know that the bishop has heard how incredibly difficult it is for local churches. And as somebody who was serving in a local church up until July, I know how difficult it was when we'd hear at annual conference, oh, mission shares are not going up, and we think, thank you, Jesus. And then in September when we got the envelope, and to discover that, oh, mission shares are going up for our local church, about $2,500, and thinking, you can't squeeze water out of this town. So I hear your pleas. I appreciate all of your hard work in trying to pay the mission shares in full. The great majority of the money in the mission shares goes to support ministry and mission in the New England Conference. And I'm not just saying that because my salary also is paid out of the mission shares, but I do really want to thank you for your generosity in caring for the community that you're serving in and for the New England Conference, as well as for the Global United Methodist Church. So now I can get off of my bully pulpit and we can proceed. Does Quinsigamond have a 2020 budget for us to look at?
Yes, it's a guesstimate by what the expenses were so far this year. The one thing I think we're going to save on this year, or next year, is the heating, because we have a new heating system in here. And right now, so far, since we've been using heat this fall, it's much better. So I'm hoping that it will continue on next year.
We transitioned from oil furnace to natural gas, very highly efficient natural gas.
Do you feel like this budget's ready for us to vote on?
Well, it's up to everybody if they want to vote on it. It's pretty, it's a guesstimate. The past salary raises in there. Everybody else is keeping the same. They've got no raises this year. Hopefully next year we can get more raise. But it's pretty close to what I think it's going to be.
Motion to approve? Can we do that?
Yeah.
I trust you.
Any questions on any of the figures on that? The thing that may still change next year is the passes health premiums, because that usually goes up in January, and what Barry has to pay towards his part of the insurance. So that might be, that's a guessing by what we have this year.
Right, and that figure was going to go from
Good. So all those who are ready to vote, all those in favor of approving the 2020 budget as printed, say aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, so we have approved the budget. So let us turn to page 3 of our bulletin for our holy conferencing ministry question. How have we loved, received, or offered mercy this past year? What gestures of mercy has God required of us?
We had a stranger come on a Sunday, and he was looking for funding, I guess it would be the best way to put it, to get back home. His home was down south, I believe, or out of state, and we were able to help him in some small way.
So to help somebody get home.
And I cannot resist interjecting, that was after he had made the same request to a church, probably with a membership 20 times ours, and they were unwilling to help, so they came to us.
Consignement gives to, collects foods and gives to the community center so that other families may have a better Thanksgiving. Plus, we assemble, is it 7 or 9 baskets for, 9 baskets for families directly. And we also serve dinners at a halfway house once a month. And get to sit down and eat dinner with these men that are trying to get their lives back on track.
Thank you.
We also do Operation Christmas Child.
I saw the pictures from you on Facebook. That was incredible. If you had any more, I don't think you could have placed your...
Actually, I had to leave some in the back seat.
Did you take a picture of your trunk here?
I did.
It was packed.
And the turkeys.
And the turkeys.
47 turkeys this year.
I hope you had a bigger car for those.
You know, the guy was very upset filling my car. He was afraid I was going to work. And that's the first, actually, this year's the first time I haven't been able to fit them all in my trunk. I had to put some of those in the back seat too. And I was riding very low.
Good thing there was no snow.
I know.
In Oxford, we've for a number of years been supporting Easter Fellowship.
Right.
We do a lot for them, we do as much as we can, and we're always thinking of new things. But we do a lunch once a month, and somebody will bring it into Worcester Center. We have socks that we donate year-round, and we have Dunkin' gift cards that we give them so that they can come in and have a coffee and at least be able to use a restroom when they're in there. So we do that faithfully. And this year we have a box in the fellowship hall where we're going to have warm blankets, coats, hats, all that kind of stuff. And probably it'll be going the next trip in, they'll be sending that in, besides the lunches. So we do really show a lot of mercy there. And ongoing with the Oxford Ecumenical Food Show. We have a assigned month that we work the food show, and we donate every month. So that's a couple of things that we do.
The first time this year, we also had a full Thanksgiving dinner for free. That was on Thanksgiving Day. It was very meaningful to everyone who participated, for sure. Certainly plan on doing it again.
I was going to say, you all jumped ahead to the humble part. You want to brag about all the ways you were doing mission and showing mercy to one another.
our mission committee has done a lot with organizing collection of cleaning supplies for disaster relief, hygiene kits for Encore. The woman that's in charge isn't here today. She keeps us up to date on all the things going on, which is, again, it's very humbling to hear.
So I was a local church pastor in Vermont, and in Vermont they had what they called these hubs where 4 times a year all the local churches would come to a centralized location and they would make the Encore hygiene kits. And it was one of the most beautiful ways I have seen God at work. Working alongside my kids, working alongside my youth group kids, working alongside 7 or 8 other local churches. I have not noticed that Central Mass does things like that.
I don't believe that exists.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, I just was curious.
They have a church that collects this stuff,
Or drop-off spot.
Yeah, drop-off. but they don't own it.
I always think it's a great opportunity for churches to get together and to eat. I mean, not eat, to work together, to bring about God's kingdom and fill our bellies, as well as our hearts.
Great project for us. We don't like Methodist.
If only I knew where there were churches who had a passion for mission. Okay. Do we have somebody from this table who's willing to read our scriptural prayer on the top of page 3?
Let us never neglect the more important matters of law, justice, mercy, and faithfulness.
So we're going to look in our individual church packets for the lay leadership or nominations report.
In the Quinsigamon package, I think you will find this format. We have the official district format in there too, but I think you will find this one more consistent with the pattern you have seen in the past. This pattern here, Oxford has the pattern that we have used from the past. Technically, Quinsig also included the official one.
Quinsig is an overachiever because that's not due for another 7 days, but they get a gold star. In fact, they maybe get a double gold star because Priscilla brought it in to us last week. It's super helpful just being next door, right? So, is it for? Okay, yes. Page 3 for Oxford. So I'd like you to take a moment, make sure that your name is where you anticipate it being, that there are no surprises, and make sure that your name is spelled correctly. And then we can take some nominations from the floor if the spirit is moving within you. And then we'll be ready to vote. So do we have any additions or corrections that we need to make at this time?
On the QUMC, my email's incorrect. It's Nancy Garcozy, not comma.
Oh, sorry. I'm gonna lose my star now, you know.
It's a document.
Yes, I know.
Is Ingleside Ave spelled correctly for Cheryl's address? Is it G-L-E or G-E-L?
Yes, it is. It's still correct. It's still correct.
And my email address should be .com.
Those pesky commas, I know.
For the Oxford community, is there any additions that you'd like to make to your leadership report or corrections?
Can I interject? Is Thomas still here? Oh. Did you say you live at apartment 7?
Yeah, 107.
Okay, because it says 1 here. Apartment 7. You just told me that this morning, that's okay.
So for our Oxford folks, is the report good as published? Okay, so we're going to vote on the trustees first. For those who are members of Oxford, do you approve William, Stephen, Jeff, Joe, Malcolm, Betty, and Buddy to be your trustees for the coming year? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed say I'll do it. Any abstentions? Okay. And then for the remainder of the report, do we have any additions that we want to make? Okay. I just have to ask if there's nominations from the floor because you never know, somebody might have the Holy Spirit move in them and say, oh, I really want to take on, and you don't want to stifle the Holy Spirit. So for Oxford, any of those who, or all those in favor of approving the remainder of the lay leadership report, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, for consignment, all those in favor of approving our trustees of Barnabas, Amy, Ken, Marlene, Bob, Gail, John, Mike, and Jan, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? And do we approve the remainder of the lay leadership report as amended with appropriate periods rather than commas? And corrected apartment number? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. So we turn now to our lay servants, and I know that we are blessed to have some lay servants in our midst. So Priscilla, would you mind just sharing a highlight of your year?
Okay, well, I officially became a certified lay servant when I took my second course with the Lay Servant Academy in January. and it was all about justice. Prior to the general conference, I wanted to know and familiarize myself more about what was going to be voted on. I took 2 other classes this year. I took political prayer? No, that's not. Public prayer, reading public prayer, that's what it was. And also called to preach. So I'm about halfway towards becoming a lay speaker. So I'm only halfway there. During the year, I enjoy participating in making dinners for the Dismas House, approximately twice a year with Barbara Hunt as my pal. And I'll relay a story a couple of years ago when we were serving. The fellows were cleaning up and we were still eating at the table, so this one fellow, about 6 feet tall, started talking to us, and I said, "What's your favorite television show?" And he said, "Downton Abbey." So here we are in this halfway house, and this fellow had a favorite show, Downton Abbey. So that was the highlight of all the years I've done that.
That's it, huh?
I've been going back to Children's Church, and I have substituted once so far this fall and enjoyed that. I'm involved in the United Methodist Women and the church choir. I served as the lay member to annual conference for the past 4 years. First starting as alternate, but then moving over to the lay member. I've shared in about 4 worship services this year. I spoke at the Oxford Church on Good Friday on the final words, and also twice in the Lay Servant Academy in the public prayer class. I was asked to share a message on newness of life, and then most recently with the Call to Preach class, I talked about Paul's mission, and was pleased to share about 1 Thessalonians, or 2 Thessalonians, I'm sorry.
She also participated in my installation and led us in the Lord's Prayer in Swedish.
Took a lot of practice. But some of you that don't have English as a first language, I aspire to you, so I felt like this was my practice to speak a different language. During the year, I put on a PowerPoint about my trip to Japan and shared about the Shinto and Buddhist religions, and also a PowerPoint about the annual conference, since I felt it was necessary to learn about what was voted on and what was ahead of us in the next couple of years. I also took over for the pastor when he was on vacation. I do enjoy going to district events. I participated in one that was during my lay servant class in Lunenburg, and at 5 o'clock I was able to join when the bishop had his conversation. And then most recently when he was down in Franklin a couple of weeks ago. In terms of spiritual growth, I've taken a lot of Bible classes at the Pilgrim United Congregational Church in Leominster. The Associate Pastor Dan Woodman has a wonderful class, always based on an Adam Hamilton book. And so I have my library of Adam Hamilton books is growing, so I need to get a bookcase just for that. I also was thrilled to go to Sweden, Denmark, and France in August, and saw many, many churches, most especially where my grandfather went to church, a church that was built in the 1700s in Sweden. I haven't been there since 1965, so that was wonderful. We met with 60 of our relatives in Sweden. And also most recently to accompany Bishop Devedar to Greece on Paul's World and Mission. So it wasn't as life-changing as the trips to Israel, but I highly recommend going on that trip. It was through the Society of Biblical Studies. So I enjoy being called to ministry and being your lay servant, and it is an honor to represent this church.
So all those in favor of approving Priscilla to be a certified lay servant for the coming year, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Hallelujah. So Bruce was unable to be here today, but his report is on page 5 and 6.
Yeah, and I would simply state what everyone at the Oxford Church knows. First, I will send regrets from Bruce. The only reason he is not here is because he planned his schedule around the conference being at 2:30 in Oxford. That's the only reason he'd actually moved a family event to noon so that he would be available at 2:30 there. And then with the weather, which I hope it starts snowing soon, or else I'm going to be in the same category as the superintendent of schools who closes down school for it to not snow. But anyway, he most certainly would have been at the Oxford Church Conference if he possibly could be. That is the way Bruce is. He is a dedicated servant, not only to the local church in Oxford, but as the folks there well know, he serves just as diligently, perhaps even more, on the conference level, working on the Board of Ordained Ministry as a lay member and on a special subcommittee specifically focused upon local licensed pastors. And he puts in a great deal of work. There are entire weekends he disappears so that he can be at some retreat center going over tens of sermons one after another to review and so on. He always returns with very helpful advice for me. Frankly, I cheat, and Bruce takes the best of the hits of the sermons he's had and shares them with me, and I steal them, so I'm grateful for that. He is a dedicated servant, and not only to our church local, but to our church regional, and we are blessed by him.
So all those in favor of approving Bruce as a certified lay servant for the coming year, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Do we have any candidates for ministry at this moment?
Not at this moment.
So, Oxford folks, do you remember the last time somebody went into the ministry from your congregation?
To actually be ordained, or just...
Or to be a local pastor? There are many different ways of being in ministry.
We had one in like 1970. Bruce, local pastor. Bruce.
Yeah, Bruce did serve 2 churches, didn't he?
That's right. And his son began study, but life got in the way.
Okay. So we know that God has worked and God is continuing to work in and through the lives of the Oxford United Methodist Church. How about consignment? Can you remember the last time somebody went into the ministry from this congregation?
We had J&J Innes, so was that about 5 years ago? And her sister.
Yes.
Sister too?
Sister too, but the sister was before her.
Oh, that's right.
Jenda was the one that was in and she serves at church.
So, the next item of business is the clergy report. And I know that your pastor has been very dedicated. He sent me 2 copies of pastor reports, one for Quincy and one for Oxford. And I said, oh my goodness, this is a lot of work. You could have just sent me one with separate membership reports. But
And you know why I did that? I started doing one, but as the form goes down, the answers are different. And so I found it more cumbersome to try to... So I said 2.
So would you like to just hear a few highlights?
Yeah, so I did not send you the form that I sent into the district. I thought there was some, it just would have been less helpful to you than a more general summary. In the Quinsigamond Church will find my general summary 3 pages before the end of the book, and you will see the changes in the membership roll as the next to the last page in the book. The membership stuff comes out of under the pastor's report. But truth be told, this is 100% Robin's work
She put all of this together for me and keeps track of it all year long as the membership secretary, and I'm very, very grateful for her for that. Similarly, in Oxford, Sue really does all of that work with the membership. And Sue also went through this past year and audited the Oxford membership, which does not sound like a big deal, but in Oxford, it was a really big deal. We had people on there, we don't know where they came from. We had people that were supposed to be there, we don't know when they showed up. I think disaster is a compliment for the kind of situation that was in. And what did it take, 3 months?
Oh, no. It was about 6 weeks.
6 weeks. 6 weeks. She had dug up names and found dates, and it's just unbelievable how much work she put into that and fixed it. So our membership roll is completely accurate at Oxford now, and I've been told by my predecessors, like nobody can remember when the Oxford rolls were right. So I very much appreciate that. And that report for Oxford is also a product of Sue's work. My general summary as your pastor, it is a joy to serve at both of your parishes. It really is. You have welcomed my wife and I and our family. We truly feel like we are part of your family. And as a pastor, you do not always get that. Sometimes you are treated as, I don't know, the hired help or something, and that has not been the case in either parish. And for that, I am truly grateful. We've talked about some of the highlights already. I will not reiterate those. But I would like to note, back along, we had, where do you show mercy? And I don't think I'm supposed to talk then, so I didn't. But one of the things in both of your churches that I have seen people's lives changed by. At the Oxford Church, people have joined the church over this, and that is the prayer shawl and prayer pal ministry that you so faithfully serve the Lord through. We literally have a person in Oxford who joined the church because they had felt kind of distanced from the church for years. And they were going through she was going, and I can say this because she took a moment and shared this with the church, so it's open information. She shared with the church that she was going through a devastating period of time. And that shawl, she would literally sit on the end of her bed and just thank God and pray with nothing left in life to hang on to except that prayer shawl. And it got her through and reconnected her with the church. And that's just because one person in the church was faithful to bring that to her and say, we are praying for you. Now, I'm highlighting Oxford because of that, but you know what, that happens just as much, maybe more, through the Quinsigamond Church too. I think that is one of those highlights of ministry that is often just overlooked, that we don't even think about. God is working. God is working in Oxford. God is working in Quinsigamond. And finally, I cannot help but be grateful for your willingness to journey with me through the spiritual formation classes that we are having in both churches. And one of the cool things there is people from Oxford are coming to the class here in Worcester. People from Worcester are going to the class in Oxford because of it just matching your time frames better. And that has brought a richness to that group. And it is a different thing. Not just Bible study, genuine spiritual formation going on like I have never experienced before. As you know, it is an experiment. And you have been so kind to walk with me through this, not only for the advantages of our churches, but also it is literally in compliance one of my courses at Boston University. And we are a guinea pig. We are going to be used as a case study when the Reverend Dr. Sarah Mount Eloanoni writes her book of curriculum on Wesleyan classes. And the reason this is such a big deal is because we have, from back in time, it's very apparent, the early Wesleyans, the spiritual formation classes were the foundation, the bedrock that made them different than every other church and gave them the power that they had that frankly others were looking for. There's a reason in 100 years' time or less, we went from 3 guys meeting in a closet at Oxford University to the second largest group on the planet, right? And those classes were one of the major foundations of that. And here's what's interesting. We know that they met, and we know by people's diaries how their lives changed. But due to the confidential nature of the classes, we have no idea what actually happened in the classes. And that's what we're trying to recreate. So you have walked with me through that. You're continuing to walk with me through that. And I expect God to use what we are learning and experiencing way beyond our bounds, but to impact the United Methodist Church, and I pray Christendom, in some powerful ways beyond what we can even imagine.
And it's nice to know that we can carry on, whether you are not there, or Sarah's not there, or when neither of you are there, we
That's
have
right.
the best discussion.
That's right, absolutely, absolutely. And that is exactly one of the things that those classes produced early on. Lay people who were servants in ministry, not waiting around for an expert to tell them how to believe in God, but serving with guidance, but serving. Oh, sorry. So my wife did make it to the Chives Conference.
I don't want to swim my first.
Yeah.
I hope you're feeling better.
Thank you.
So I'd like to just say a big word of thanks to those who have updated the membership report. It is a lot of work, I know. But I'd just like to highlight the importance of keeping an up-to-date membership. In case there's ever anything big and important that we need to vote on, it's important to have an up-to-date list. One of the churches in Vermont had an investor that wanted to buy up the land that the church was on and was willing to buy or build a new church 2 miles down the road for the congregation, because he owned the land on the left and he owned the land on the right, and so he had this vision of building senior housing. But he needed the church building to be relocated. And this church was a tiny little rural church, and the roof was in need of repairs, and slate roofs are really expensive to repair. And the foundation was a little unsteady, so the congregation really felt, oh, this is an answer to prayer. Well, they came to the church conference, and the people who were on the membership rolls, who had not shown up in the last 25 years, came out in force because they didn't want their church to move 2 miles down the road, even though they couldn't be bothered to attend the church where it was present. And so I just appreciate when we as congregations take the time to really make sure that our membership is accurate. Just in case there ever was a reason that we needed to have a big church conference and vote on something controversial, it's good to have an accurate representation of who really is active and involved in the life of the community. So, I know I have asked all sorts of disciplinarily related questions, but that doesn't necessarily get to the very heart of who you are as Oxford and who you are as Quincy. Are there things that you want to share that we have not yet addressed? Well, hearing none, I'm going to come to our last Holy Conferencing Ministry question, and then we will transition into communion and then get on the road before the snow starts. Hopefully. How have we walked humbly with God this past year, and how are we required to walk humbly in the coming year?
We have a program called Stand Up. We help out a program called Stand Up for Kids, and we provide socks and we provide total trees this year. These are for teens on the streets. And also we have a snack and backpack program with the school next door. Kids have good nutrition.
Would somebody be willing to read our scriptural prayer?
Therefore, as God's chosen people, holy and dearly loved, we clothe ourselves with compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience.
So on the top of page 4, we have another verse of how shall I come before the Lord? We approach the sacred meal with hearts for justice and in a spirit of humility, praying that God will hear us, show mercy to us and through us, and receive us. So let us join in a time of silent confession